Picture this. You open your banking app right now and you see a balance sitting there. Maybe it is $10,000, maybe it is even $50,000. And something inside you exhales. You feel responsible. You feel prepared. You feel like you have done everything right because that is exactly what every trusted adult in your life told you to do with your money. Save it, keep it safe, build a cushion. But here's the part that nobody in your family, school, or neighborhood ever sat you down to explain. What looks like financial safety is actually functioning more like a very slow, very quiet financial leak. That money is not just sitting there waiting for you. It is shrinking every single day because there is an invisible force at work that is steadily stripping the value from every dollar you have stored. And the institution holding that money is not just indifferent to this fact, they are actively profiting from it. By the time this video is over, I am going to show you exactly why your savings account may be your single biggest financial liability right now. We are going to pull back the curtain on how the banking system actually operates, and we are going to build a clear, actionable plan so that you can finally stop hemorrhaging purchasing power without even realizing it. To really feel the weight of what is happening here, we need to get into the actual numbers, because this is where the picture starts to look genuinely alarming. Banks have spent decades conditioning us to accept savings account interest rates that are so low they barely register. We are talking about fractions of a single percent in many traditional accounts. Now hold that against the reality that inflation has been persistently chipping away at the cost of living at somewhere around 3% annually or more in recent years. When you subtract what the bank is paying you from what inflation is taking from you, the math becomes stark. You are not saving. You are paying a hidden annual fee of roughly 2.6% or more just for the privilege of storing your money with them. On a $50,000 balance, that silent erosion means the purchasing power of your money will have effectively dropped to the equivalent of around $37,000 in just a decade. You did not spend a cent, you did not lose a single dollar on a screen, but you lost $13,000 in real terms. I call this the invisible heist because the bank is taking your deposits and turning them into car loans, mortgages, and business lines of credit at interest rates of 7%, 15%, sometimes 25% on revolving credit, while they hand you back a fraction of 1% and let inflation quietly devour the difference. Now, if this is all just simple math, why do so many intelligent, hardworking, careful people still fall into this pattern? The answer is not stupidity, it's biology. It's the way our minds were wired in response to our early financial environment. On this channel, we talk a lot about the poverty mindset, the mental programming that develops when you grow up watching money feel scarce and unpredictable. That experience literally rewires the way your brain processes risk. So when you see a large, stable number in your savings account, your nervous system calms down. Your amygdala gets a chemical signal that you have enough resources to survive whatever comes next. And that feeling of safety becomes deeply addictive. This connects to what behavioral economists call loss aversion, the well-documented psychological principle that the pain of losing money registers at approximately twice the emotional intensity of the pleasure of gaining the same amount. So you will choose a guaranteed but invisible loss to inflation every single time over the possibility of a visible but temporary dip in an investment account, because one feels safe in the moment, even though it's objectively worse for your financial future. To break free from this loop, you also need to understand something about how banks actually function, because the story most people have in their head is simply wrong. Many of us picture our money sitting in a vault somewhere with our name on it, just waiting for us to come and get it. That is not how it works at all. Banks operate on something called fractional reserve banking, which means they are legally required to hold only a small fraction of your deposit as actual reserves. Everything else, the vast majority of your money, is immediately lent out to other customers. Your savings become someone else's home renovation loan or their credit card balance, earning the bank dramatically more than they are paying you. When you let excess cash sit in a low-yield account, you are essentially donating your capital to their profit engine. You are their raw material. And the wealthy population of this country figured this out long ago and made a very different choice. They treat money like something that must be in motion to maintain its value. They understand at a fundamental level that stagnant money is dying money, and that the only way to fight the forces working against your wealth is to put your capital to work.
Here is where the true cost of this trap starts to feel absolutely breathtaking, because when we introduce the concept of opportunity cost, the numbers become almost hard to believe. Imagine you are being cautious, understandably cautious, and you have decided to keep $50,000 in savings as a financial cushion. But let us say, honestly, that you only need $10,000 for genuine emergencies. That leaves $40,000 sitting in a low-yield account for emotional comfort. Now consider what happens if, instead, you invested that $40,000 into a simple, low-cost index fund, tracking the broad stock market with average annual returns of around 10%. Over a 30-year period, that single lump sum grows to approximately $697,000, which means the actual cost of keeping that money in a savings account was not zero. It was not even a little. It was more than $650,000 in lost future wealth. You paid the bank hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime to hold on to money that was doing nothing for you. That is the most expensive security blanket imaginable. A huge piece of why this pattern perpetuates itself is that people have blurry, undefined boundaries around what actually qualifies as a financial emergency. I see this constantly. Someone has a large balance in their savings account, and they start mentally spending it on a holiday, a furniture refresh, a new gadget, because the money is there and it feels available. But we need to reframe this entirely. Your emergency fund is not a general-purpose spending reserve. It is a very specific financial instrument. Think of it like insurance. It exists not to be spent on things you want, but to prevent you from having to make catastrophically timed financial decisions, like selling your investments at the bottom of a market crash because your income dried up and you had nothing else to draw on. Liquidity is absolutely essential. Cash is oxygen. The problem is not having cash. The problem is having far more cash than you actually need, while that excess slowly loses its value. So, what is the solution? I want to introduce you to a framework I use called the Liquidity Ladder. It is a structured, intentional system for allocating your money across different purposes so that you have exactly the right amount of cash in exactly the right places. The first rung of this ladder is what I call your friction buffer. This is the money that lives in your checking account, roughly 1 month of expenses, maybe a small cushion on top, and its sole purpose is to keep the practical machinery of your life running smoothly. You are not trying to earn a return on this money. It is a tool, not an investment. The second rung is your true emergency fund, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong in a very fixable way. Your emergency fund should not live in a traditional savings account earning near zero interest. It belongs in a high-yield savings account, which in the current rate environment can earn 4 to 5% annually on your deposits. These accounts are just as safe, just as liquid, and just as accessible as a regular savings account. If you are single and renting, you need roughly 3 months of essential living expenses here. If you have a family, a mortgage, or an income that could be more vulnerable to disruption, build it to 6 months. And then, this part is absolutely critical. Once that account is full, you stop. You do not keep pouring money into it beyond the target. Every single dollar above that threshold needs to be redirected. That brings us to the third and most powerful rung, your wealth engine. This is where the compounding magic happens. Every dollar that comes in after your emergency fund is fully funded gets deployed into tax-advantaged accounts first, your 401k, your IRA, your Roth, and then into a taxable brokerage account where you're purchasing index funds and other long-term assets. These assets make you an owner of the global economy. They fight inflation not by outrunning it by a few decimal points, but by fundamentally changing your relationship with it. You go from being a victim of economic forces to being a beneficiary of them. If you're sitting on a large pile of cash right now and the thought of moving it into the market all at once sends your heart rate up, I completely understand. And there's a smart, proven strategy for exactly that situation. It's called dollar cost averaging, and it works like this. Instead of making one large lump sum investment, you divide that excess cash into 6 equal portions and set up an automatic transfer to invest one portion on the first of every month for 6 consecutive months. The power of this approach is psychological as much as mathematical. It removes you from the decision entirely. You automate the action and then you step back. And here's the beautiful part. If the market drops after your first contribution, you actually benefit because your next automatic transfer will buy more shares at a lower price, reducing your average cost per share. You stop fearing volatility and start using it as a tool.
You also need to make a significant mental shift about what risk actually means for you at this stage of life. If you are young, the thing that should genuinely terrify you is not a short-term market correction. It is arriving at retirement age without enough money to stop working. The stock market has historically delivered returns of around 10% annually over long periods, while inflation runs at roughly 3%, giving you a real inflation-adjusted return of about 7%. Cash accounts offer returns that barely touch inflation. The gap between those two paths over decades is the gap between financial independence and financial precarity. The market goes down. The market also comes back. History has consistently rewarded investors who stayed patient. It has not rewarded those who stayed in savings accounts out of fear. Making all of this work requires more than a plan. It requires an identity shift. I want you to stop thinking of yourself as a saver and start thinking of yourself as a capital allocator. A saver asks, is my money safe? A capital allocator asks, is my money working? Every dollar you have is a tiny employee, and right now, some of those employees are sleeping on the job inside a low-yield account. Your job is to move them to a department where they are actually productive, your investment portfolio. Here is how you make that concrete. Calculate your monthly burn rate by averaging your last 3 or 4 months of actual spending. Multiply that by 6. That number is your absolute maximum cash holding. Any dollar above that number is a lazy dollar that needs to be deployed into assets immediately. And then automate the whole system so that once your checking account reaches a set threshold, the overflow sweeps automatically into your investment accounts. No willpower required, no emotional decision-making in the moment, just a system running quietly in the background, building your future. The hardest part of all of this is accepting that comfort has a price. Keeping everything in the bank is not cautious, it is expensive. It is a tax you are paying to your own anxiety. The safety trap is seductive precisely because it does not feel like a trap at all. It feels like responsibility. It feels like prudence. But underneath that feeling, the math is working against you every single day. Real financial freedom is not built on a pile of static cash. It is built on assets that generate value over time, regardless of whether you are watching them or not. Let us also address the deeper psychology here, because understanding why this mindset is so hard to shake is half the battle. The wealthiest people in the world hold a tiny fraction of their net worth in actual cash. And this is not recklessness. It is a sophisticated understanding of something called the velocity of money. Wealthy people move money into assets as quickly as possible after receiving it, because they understand that a dollar sitting still is a dollar in reverse. Cash is a depreciating asset. That phrase sounds strange because we've been taught to think of cash as the benchmark, the thing everything else is measured against. But in an inflationary economy, cash is always losing ground. The middle class feels like it is running harder and harder just to stay in place. And this is exactly why they are storing their labor in an instrument that is designed to erode. The banking industry invests enormous resources in marketing that frames savings accounts as smart, responsible, even virtuous financial behavior.
They offer incentives to open accounts because they understand the long-term value of your deposits is worth thousands of times more to them than any sign-up bonus they will ever give you. They are profiting from the gap between what they earn on your money and what they pay you for it. The shift you need to make is to stop being a depositor and start thinking like an investor, someone who lends capital to the economy and earns a return on it. When you buy an index fund, you are purchasing partial ownership of the companies that produce the goods and services that drive the global economy. That shift from pure consumer to part owner is the fundamental dividing line between people who accumulate generational wealth and those who work hard their entire lives and still arrive at retirement feeling financially fragile. Many people hold excessive cash because they have internalized a vague but powerful fear of some undefined future catastrophe. And yes, life does deliver hard moments, but that 6-month emergency buffer we built in the second rung of the liquidity ladder covers the overwhelming majority of real-world financial shocks. Holding $80,000 or $100,000 in cash to protect against an emergency that would realistically cost $5,000 or $10,000 is spectacularly inefficient. It's like wearing body armor every day to protect against the possibility that someone might bump into you on the street.
We also have to talk about what happens emotionally when you see your investment account fluctuate. You will invest money, and then you will watch the balance drop. This will feel real, and it will feel bad, and simultaneously, your savings account balance will remain perfectly stable, and that will feel safe. But here is the crucial distinction that will change how you interpret both of those experiences. The stability of the savings account number is an illusion. The number stays the same while the value of what that number can purchase is falling. The investment account number fluctuates while the underlying value, when measured over years and decades, is rising. You have to learn to see past the short-term volatility and orient yourself toward the long-term trajectory, which for the broad stock market has never permanently reversed. Tax efficiency is another dimension of this that rarely gets discussed and has a real impact on your outcomes. When your savings account earns interest, that income is taxed as ordinary income, the highest rate you pay. But when your investments appreciate over time and you sell after holding for more than a year, those gains are taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rate. You are keeping more of what you earn. So by holding excess cash in savings, you are simultaneously accepting the lowest possible returns and paying the highest possible taxes on them. Moving into investments flips both of those dynamics in your favor. And there is a critical distinction to draw between intentional saving and unconscious hoarding. If you are building toward a specific goal with a specific timeline, a house down payment in 2 years, a car purchase next spring, then a high-yield savings account is exactly the right tool for that money. Keep it safe, keep it liquid, keep it close. But if you are accumulating cash with no clear timeline and no defined purpose, purely because it feels good to see the number grow, you are hoarding out of fear. Give every dollar a job. Money you need within the next 12 months lives in cash. Money you will not touch for a decade belongs in the market. Inflation is not just the price of groceries creeping up, it's the cost of your future freedom escalating. The amount of money required to sustain your lifestyle in retirement will be dramatically higher than it is today. $1 million sounds significant right now, but in 30 years, accounting for inflation, that sum might carry the purchasing power of roughly $400,000 in today's money. If your wealth is sitting in cash the entire time, you are not building toward retirement, you are falling further behind it every single year. Investing in diversified, low-cost index funds is the only proven accessible mechanism available to regular people to consistently outpace inflation over time. The Liquidity Ladder Framework gives you a way to honor both of the competing needs inside you, the need for security and the need for growth, without sacrificing one for the other.
You have your cash buffer for emergencies. You have your wealth engine for the future. Both systems run in parallel, and together they give you something that neither one can give you alone, a genuine, mathematically grounded sense of security rather than an emotionally satisfying but financially costly illusion of it. I also want you to think carefully about the financial advice you receive from the people closest to you. The people who love you most are often operating from the same outdated, fear-based framework that is keeping you stuck. They will tell you the market is too risky. They will tell you cash is the only thing you can count on. They mean well, but if you look at where those beliefs have led their finances, you have to ask yourself honestly whether that is the destination you want to reach. Wanting different outcomes means making different choices, and different choices require you to be willing to step away from the financial consensus of your immediate environment and anchor your decisions in data and history instead. The journey from saver to investor is not instantaneous, and it is not always comfortable. It starts with building that emergency fund foundation, and then it becomes about consistently, automatically feeding your wealth engine. You do not need to be brilliant. You do not need to time the market or pick individual stocks. You just need to start and then stay consistent. The market will test you. There will be periods of volatility that feel alarming. Stay the course anyway, because patience has always been rewarded and panic has always been punished. Think about the financial legacy you want to create for yourself, not just for yourself, but for the people who come after you. Think about the money story you want to pass on to your kids or the next generation you care about. Do you want to hand them a belief system built around fear and scarcity, or do you want to show them what it looks like to be a deliberate, informed, empowered steward of capital? When you break this pattern, you are not just changing your own trajectory, you are rewriting the financial narrative of your entire family lineage. That's the actual scale of what's at stake here. So here's what I want you to do right now, before you close this tab or put down your phone. Look at your finances with fresh eyes. Calculate your real monthly spending. Multiply by 6. That's your maximum cash holding. Everything above that number is not savings, it's laziness wearing a safety costume. Move it into a high-yield savings account if it's not already there. Open a brokerage account if you don't have one. Set up an automatic investment transfer so the decision never has to be made consciously again. Let the system do the work. The fear you feel as you watch your cash balance drop toward your target number is not a warning signal. It's your primitive brain reacting to a modern problem with ancient instincts. Acknowledge the feeling, then act anyway. Every single day you wait is another day that the gap between where you are and where you could be grows wider. The best moment to have started this was in the past. The second best moment is right now. Don't let the paralysis of overthinking become more expensive than the discomfort of action, because inaction has a very real price, and you are already paying it. Trust the long arc of market history, trust the power of compounding over time, and most importantly, trust yourself to navigate whatever comes up along the way. You are far more capable of managing this than the financial system has ever given you credit for. Now stop paying the fear tax, cap your cash, deploy the rest, and start building the wealth you have always deserved.